My name is Brett Boyce. I've been around 13 and a half years with the company. I'm currently a principal technical support engineer, and QlikView platform is still my primary focus. So with that, let's jump into the agenda for today. The first thing I'm going to cover is the QlikView server unbalanced clustering. This is actually pretty simple, not a lot to it, and just a heads up, we've done a lot of work on the help pages related to this functionality, so everything should be all set. If you use the help page, everything should go smoothly for you. But I'm going to go through things anyway, just so you can see that there's not a whole lot to it. Distribution service unbalanced clustering will be the next thing, and that's going to also include not only the unbalanced clustering aspect, but the other aspect that I tried to cover, I think, of a year or so ago that we had some trouble with. So, and again, we may get some troubleshooting here because I haven't actually run things in this environment because it was going to be too much to reset. So we'll see if everything goes smoothly or if we have any problems there. And I'm going to do demonstrations on both. And I'll give you at least the one known issue I'm aware of, and that's related to the server unbalanced clustering. And then we'll take questions, and we may take some questions in between as well when the publisher stuff is running toward the end on the unbalanced clustering for the distribution service. When you're doing your questions, please keep in mind that we may not get to it during the session, so give me as much detail as possible in the question so I can make sure I get you a good answer if it's one that I've got to answer post-presentation. All right, and with that, so my demo environment, I've got 7 total servers. I've got 6 related to the actual QlikView platform. On the first one, I've got my management service, distribution service, and directory service. And then 2 and 3 are my secondary and third QDS service. So I've got 3 publisher nodes. And then 4, 5, and 6 are my server nodes. 4, I've got the IIS web server. 5, I've got our web server. So I can show you both sides of that. And then I went ahead and clustered the directory service on both as well. And then I've also got an extra server that serves as my domain controller and file server. And before any of you speak up and say, yes, this is not best practice, but it's how we set up our virtual environment to be able to have a separate file server. But this is not something you'd want to do in a production environment, just FYI. Okay, with that, let's jump into the QDS cluster use cases. I just thought of a few things off the top of my head that'll hopefully help you kind of get things into perspective. Basically, one scenario would be you need a large server for a really large application, and the rest of your apps are fairly small and don't need a lot of resources. In those cases, it might be a scenario where you need a multi-core with a ½ terabyte of memory, and the other server could be, an 8-core with 32 gig on it. In prior to 12.1, there was no supported way to run these environments. But with this new functionality now, you're able to basically run these unbalanced environments. The next one that I thought of was a large server for your main known good applications. Run into a lot of support cases with customers who have had a situation where developers instituted a new application to the environment and that app ends up having problems and causes issues on that primary server. So this was another area I could think of that would be a good use case, would be you have one large server for all your good apps, and then you have maybe a smaller server that's just for those new apps coming into the environment. So it's a place where you can run things without worrying about taking down the primary server. And the last one I've got was basically kind of a scenario where your IT group may want to set up every business group with their own server. And obviously different business groups are going to have different needs as far as resources depending on the size of the apps, number of users, etc. So that was the last one I could think of that would be a good reason to potentially do an unbalanced cluster. Okay, so the setup, I'm just going to run through this, but I'll show you in the demo here in a second. Basically, the key thing is to set the activate unbalanced cluster setting to true in the management service config file. It's a little counterintuitive there, but you turn it on in the management service, not the QlikView server side. So once the management service knows that the QlikView server is an unbalanced cluster, then it'll be looking for some other settings. And those are going to be in either our web server config file or it's going to be settings that you need to add to the IIS um, uh, manager via the application settings applet in the ASP.NET section. And I'll cover that too, so don't worry. And the last thing is, in order for this functionality to load balance well, you want to make sure that you choose the CPU with RAM overload setting in the web server resource. That's where the settings trigger from for that I'm going to show you up here in the prior bullet with the web server settings. It'll be more clear here in a little bit when we go through the demo. And then lastly, I'm just going to touch on some of the load balance algorithm settings and explain how you can get loaded document or put a larger focus on RAM versus CPU, etc. And then lastly, I put the help link in here for you guys. This is for the November/12.2 track. Basically, both the 12.1 and 12.2 track help was updated with the new information. So again, the help should be very good, and if you follow it all the way through, you shouldn't have any problems with things. And with that, let me jump over to the demo here. Okay. Hopefully you can see I've got the help up for you. I figured we'd start here. So basically, we give you an overview of things. One of the key things mentioned up toward the top here is that when you enable this, your CPU affinity and your working set limits in the management console are going to disappear once we turn this on. So let me just jump over here and show you real quick what that is going to entail. Go to my QlikView server and the performance tab. This section, let's see, I don't know if I can highlight this. The CPU and the working set limit sections are going to go away once we activate this. So let's go ahead and do that first. So what I'm going to do is I've got this highlighted. This is the activate unbalanced cluster setting. We just change this to true. Okay, and then I'm going to do a save. All right, and then I need to go restart my management service for that change to get picked up. Okay, and I'm going to minimize that. Let's go back to our, I'm going to skip the help here. Let's go back to the management console. All right, let me just do a refresh here. And I'll have to go back in. And you can see those two sections have now disappeared. Okay, so that's all there is to enable things. Now the other side of this is what happens in the PGO files, in the settings, or in the any data PGO. We're no longer going to have the CPU affinity or working set limits there either. Each server is going to use its local settings INI settings for the CPU affinity and memory settings. So each box will know what resources it's got available. That's basically how we get around. That's how we get this functionality to work. Okay, so the next piece we need to do. Let me just jump back to the server setup here real quick. The rest of this has to do with the web server algorithms. Which is what we want the web server to figure out which node we're going to be sent to based on how we set up the CPU with RAM overload algorithm. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to jump back to my QlikView web server box, and we're going to start here. The settings are already in the config file, and the config file is located up here at the top. I don't know if you can, I can't highlight it, sorry. Whoops, I just screwed that up. It's C program files, QlikView, server, web server, QView web server, exe config. Okay, and the settings are going to be in the CPU and RAM overload balance settings area. Let me see if I can highlight that. So it's going to be this section here. And the settings that you're wanting to change are going to be these guys. Oops, sorry, had it and lost it. It's going to be these four here. So we've got the first one, which we need to make this true instead of false. And then I've got the CPU weight, the RAM weight, and the loaded dock weight. So let's go ahead and change this to true. Okay. And then what I'm going to do in mine is I'm going to leave the CPU weight and the RAM weight as they are, but I'm going to change if I can find my mouse here. Okay. I'm going to change the loaded document weight to a 7. So what I'm doing here by doing this is I'm telling the web server to ask the QlikView servers about the loaded documents they have. So if you kind of want to make sure that once an app's loaded on a server, that's where you put those user sessions, you want to increase the loaded document weight above the CPU and RAM weights if you want that to be your primary factor. If you want CPU to be the factor, then you just make that a higher number. So that's kind of what you do here, and it's a little bit of trial and error, but I just kind of wanted to explain the basics on that. So let's go ahead and save this. Okay, and then I need to restart the web server service on this box. Okay, and then as a test here, we'll make sure, go back to my primary server, and I've already got the access points up, and this is the one for server 5, which is my web server, so we'll do a refresh here, and we'll just make sure. Okay, and things come back up, so we're all good to go here. Okay, so for IIS, let me jump back to the help real quick. You'll note we've got the KeyBase cluster set up for IIS here, and then down here toward the bottom is load balancing for our web server. So just make sure you use the correct section when you're trying to set up the web server side. And then also note these other caveats here. You want to make sure that in your settings any file for the QlikView server services that you don't have any of these settings that are mentioned. You'll want to clear those out. Or if you want to individually set those, you can set those manually. All right, and then we cover the part on the IIS manager, which I'm going to show you next here as far as how to add the weight settings, because you don't do those in a config file. You do them directly in the IIS manager. So we're going to jump over to server 4, and I'm already in the manager. You want to be on the default website or whichever website you've got things installed to, and then you come over here to the ASP.NET section and you open the application settings applet. Okay, and I've already added 3 of the 4 settings. So I've got my unbalanced cluster load balancer set to true. I did my CPU weight 5 and my RAM weight 3. What I'm going to do is just click add, and then you get this dialog. You simply put the name of the setting and the value in there. And I'm just going to grab these. I've already got the last one highlighted. And the defaults are 533 as we saw in the other one. I noted those, but I'm going to change it, the loaded doc one, to a 7 again. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to paste the setting, make that a value of 7, and OK, and then I've got the setting there. Now the next thing I'm going to do, just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and do an IIS reset as well, just to make sure that .NET picks up those setting changes when we hit things. Okay, that should be all good. Now we'll jump back to the first server, and this tab is my server 4 access point based on the IIS web server. So we'll do a refresh here. And okay, for some reason I'm getting a login. Okay, but it works. So sorry about the login. I'm not sure why that popped up. It should have let me in without it, but everything's working fine. So what we should start seeing now is everything working properly, but what will happen in the background is the larger server or the server with more cores, etc., you should start seeing your load balancing change based on your settings. So depending on how you've configured things, you'll start to notice that things should behave better. There's one known issue. I'll cover that at the end here, just so you're aware. All right, with that, let me jump back to the PowerPoint show. Okay, now we're going to jump into the distribution service, unbalanced cluster. So the use cases here are pretty much the same as the server, basically, except in this case, you maybe want to dedicate a server for all of your primary applications. And then you have a secondary publisher for either non-critical apps or new apps that you're unsure of as well, kind of like the same scenario we discussed on the QlikView server side. You might want to have additional capacity for peak periods where you don't need another full-size server. So say you have one really large box, but at month end or quarter end, you run into a situation where you need that extra resource to complete things within your window, but you don't need another huge box. This is another reason that you'd probably want to consider using this functionality as well. And then lastly, just like the QlikView server, if if you're wanting to segregate your business groups into their own publisher server environments, obviously, and you want to manage things from a single management console, then you're going to have differing size nodes for everybody. So this would be another reason that you'd want to use this. So the key things on the QDS setup basically have to do with the distribution group definition template XML file, which again is in the management service. It's in the program data path, but this template's in here. The first thing you want to do is take a copy of this and then edit that copy. You want to leave this template as it is, because that way any changes you make to your environment will be reflected in that template file. And then all you would need to do is just redo that template and then change your settings back if you add more QDS resources or make any other changes. Next, modify the definition file settings to meet your use case. And then I gave you the help link here as well. So let me jump back to virtual environment. Okay, and here's the help page for the distribution group. This one I haven't gone through yet. I'm going to try to get a hold of the documentation people to see if we can improve this, because I know some of this is confusing to folks. I'm going to try and do as good a job I can explaining some things here, but that's the help. Let's go to the management console, and let me just show you one thing that's going to happen here. So on the advanced tab, when we activate this, the QlikView engine section is going to go away, and we're going to see a bunch of text show up down here at the bottom once I activate this. So with that, let me just go ahead and do, and so here's the original template copy. So what it did was it picked up my 3 publisher servers, and it basically set the defaults. It set 4 for the simultaneous QVB engines. This is actually, this setting here is equivalent in the management console. Let me just show you real quick, to this guy, the engines for distribution. And what this is allowing us to do is we can set the number of engines differently per server. So if one of your servers has 12 cores, another one has 24, another one has 6 or something, you can change these to the N-1 best practice rule to make sure that you don't overload the box that way. The reader engines, a lot of folks don't know what these are for, so let me show you real quick. Basically, in the management console, in the documents, source documents, just going to go to one of my tasks real quick here. Anytime you're in a task and you have an open document button, when you click that open doc button, that's what uses those admin engines. And those admin engines are separate because this obviously doesn't use a lot of resources. All we're doing is opening the application to get the list of fields back. Or on the other tabs, we're doing bookmarks and other pulls. So that's what those admin engines are for, just so you guys know. All right, let me go back to my cluster here. All right, and then let's go back to Notepad. The run dedicated task, this is false by default. The grace timeout minutes, this is a new feature in 12.1 and later as well. And where this comes into play is in the management console as well, over here on the status tab. Let me just expand all. Oops, sorry, wrong spot. Services menu. When I click on my QS cluster, you see this stop icon. So what this setting equates to is the number of minutes when you click that stop icon in the management console that the QDS is going to allow things to keep running in the QVB processes that you've got open. So what you want to try and figure out is, what's your longest task period, your max individual task runtime. And that's probably what I'd set this to. That way you don't have to worry about, if you click stop, that you end up killing something halfway through. But that's the purpose of this, is to allow you to stop that process cleanly by allowing it to continue to run until all the tasks running on that node are done. What it'll do is it'll prevent any new tasks from starting once you click that, but it'll let the running tasks go ahead and complete before it shuts the service down. So it's a much cleaner way for you to be able to do maintenance on the publisher boxes. And then the other key thing here is the distribution groups. By default, these are commented out, and you can add more if you need them, or just leave the existing ones commented if you only want one or two of them. Okay, so with that, let me jump over to, so this is how I've got things set to go in the setup I've got. I changed my primary box because he's running the management service to only do one QVB, so it's only going to run one task at a time. Left my reader engines at 20 because I don't really care about those. I'm not setting any dedicated QVBs, which is here. And then I'm leaving the false on the dedicated task, and I set my graceful refresh time, or my graceful shutdown time to 30 minutes. And I activated the group A group for this node. Okay, so for node 2, since he's a dedicated box, I went ahead and left. I've only got 2 cores on each machine, so I think I forgot to mention that initially. So I left this at 2. Technically, it should be 1, given the best practice rule of n-1, but for our purposes, I'm going to leave it set to 2. And then I've got a dedicated QVB. I'm just going ahead and setting 1 here, but I'm leaving the run alone false. And then I've got the graceful of 30 as well. But what I've done here is I'm saying this node can run tasks from group A or group B. So he's going to run things that could run on node 1, but he's also going to run things that I'm going to set just to him as well. And then the last one, I've pretty much got the same setup, 220. We've got the 1 dedicated, but I've changed the dedicated task run alone to true. And what this is going to mean is when I've got a dedicated task, when that task gets kicked off on that node, it's not going to actually run until all the other tasks that are currently running complete and stop. Then this task will be able to start. And while he's running, no other task is going to be allowed to run on that node. The use case for this that I can think of would be a situation where you've got a really large app and it needs all of the resources on one of your publisher nodes in order to complete successfully every day. This is where you could use this to say, look, I want to make sure this guy has full access to that server by himself. So this is where you'd want to use this setting to say, you know, when I set this dedicated setting, I want that task to basically wait till everything else is done. Then I want him to run by himself. Then once he's done, then everything can resume as normal. And what I've done down in the group is I've set him to group C. Okay, so with that, let me jump back to, let me save this actually. And then, okay, and then I'm going to go to my file browser and get the right one here. So all you need to do to activate this is just rename this template file by taking out the template part. Okay, and then I need to restart my management service. Okay. Okay, and now we should be active. Let's go look at the management console quickly. And let me go back to my QDS resource and the advanced tab. And you can see that first, my engine section went away. So now I just start with section access. And now I've got my cluster node settings. So I can see how I have each of my nodes configured. The bad news here is that you can't make any changes via the management console at this point. You have to go back to your file. I'm just going to say yes here, and that's shoot. Don't tell me that just changed. Oh, it might have recreated the template file. Sorry. But if I reopen, let me just do that real quickly if I can. Yeah, I've got a third one here now. Okay. I was unaware of that recreates the template file, so that's actually good that we caught that. So here's my file that I'm currently using with all my settings, and that is what's being picked up in the management console. So we know that we're all good here. Okay, so now what I've got to do is one last configuration step that I couldn't do until I had this activated. Now you can see I've got this distribution group column that showed up. This wasn't here prior to me turning on the feature. So what I can do now is I can edit the task and I can change the group. And I've already got these set. I'll cover this in a second here. Apply that. I kind of did things by group and server, so you'll be able to see here. Edit group A. Okay. Okay, so you can see up here I had this listed as Group A, so all these tasks are under Group A. So that's how I know I want those to run under Node 1, basically. And I got the same thing on the next one. I've got Group B for these three. So I'm just going to set these to Group B real quick. Sorry, I probably should have done this ahead of time, but I wanted you guys to see as much as possible. So I apologize for the boringness here. Okay, so we've got B done, and then now I've got Group C. So these go to basically the third node. C again, and the last one. Okay, all right. Now, for this last section, you'll see I listed these as no group, but what I did was I put down which server I want these to run on. So I'm going to do here, I want this one to run on server 3, which is my C node. So that's where I'm going to put that one. And then this one I want to be on server 2, which is the B node. And this one goes to server 3. And that goes to C. Apply. Okay. And the one thing I realize I don't see here is the dedicated. I was assuming there should be a dedicated. I might have to answer that later for you guys because I'm not exactly sure where that setting is myself. Because I've got that dedicated engine allowed, but I'm not sure how to set that to actually run as dedicated. So I'll have to go back and figure that one out and add that back as a Q&A for you in the end, so you can go back and check that. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and kick these off. And the first ones are manual. And then those are going to run. And what we should be able to see here. Oh, and another new thing. This is for the 12.2 track. For those of you that may not know, we added the document log out here. So you don't have to actually go hunt down the document log anymore. You can actually look at it directly in the QMC now, which is a handy tool when you're trying to troubleshoot what's going on. Okay. And you see these pause icons. These are new as well. And what this means is I've got an overload condition on the server. And let me show you real quick. I went ahead and brought this up just so I could show you guys. In the distribution config file, there's two new settings. The CPU overload limit, it's the two I've got highlighted here in gray. The CPU overload limit is 75, that's the default, and the memory overload of 90. I wouldn't recommend changing these normally, but if you've got dedicated servers, you can probably tweak these a little bit. On the CPU overload, I probably wouldn't go higher than 90 if you can avoid it. If you have to go to 95, you probably can, but you want to try and leave a little headspace for the operating system and any other processes running on the server. But if it is a dedicated publisher box and isn't doing anything else but publisher, you can probably bump up the CPU overload. And if you've got a large box with a large amount of memory, just like the QlikView server, you can probably adjust your overload limit higher as well. Just make sure you leave a percentage, like 4 to 10 gig for the OS and any other sub-processes that run on that server just to be safe. Okay, let's jump back to the management console. Okay, so we've just got a couple that ended up queuing and waiting, and it looks like I've got a problem because I did that one dedicated, but I didn't tell it to do that. All the others finished. So I had a problem, just like last time, with this one. So I'll have to do some troubleshooting on this. I don't want to take up time from our Q&A, but I'll try to do that and see if I can add a Q&A answer or do something post on the recording post to leave a note as to what happened here. Okay,
it looks like
so
the
sorry.
B and C's never got triggered.
Yeah, they're stuck in the pause state, which I'm not sure.
No, up on Group B and Group C, I'm looking at last execution and never.
Oh, true. So they didn't kick. Group A, no, it's good. Yeah, that's weird. Only a handful of them actually took off. Okay, so this is similar to what we ran into the last time I tried to do this. So I'll have to play around with this and see, but But so just so you guys don't feel alone, even bad things happen to us as well. So I'll do some more work on this. Like I said, I think the help may need some additional guidance on things. So I'll do some more digging around on this. But basically, you understand how to configure things. It's just a matter if you configure things, they're not working like you think they should be, just open a support case and let us know, and we can route in. But I'll definitely look into this myself, and if I find any issues, I'll get those submitted to the engineers to take into account and try to get fixed for us. Yeah, so I'm not sure, and I've got automatic refresh on, so it should be doing things. Now the funny thing is, some of this is lying because this says never as well, but I've actually got a log.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Well, we are running a little low on time.
Yep.
So.
Let's do, so, and it says completed, so it looks like it's just something with the console not updating.
Okay.
Now it says he's running again, so I'm not sure what the heck's going on. I've just got something crossed up somewhere. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so with that, let me jump back to my PowerPoint. And okay, so the one known issue has to do with if you're using, let me jump back to the demo environment. If in the, so jump back to my, I'm going to use our web server. There's a new setting also called Open Access Point Load Balancer. I believe this is 12.2 track only. You can turn this to true. What it'll do is it forces the app list load on the access point to use the load balancing algorithm to figure out which QlikView server to handle that request as well. So you not only get the load balancing when they open the app, you do the load balance check when you load the access point doc list as well. So if you're seeing issues where sometimes the users are getting either no document or their document list is unpredictable, it could be because the one node they're hitting is super busy. So that's a case where you might want to go ahead and set this to true so that we do the load balance check before they try to do that. But in this setup, when you do that, what can happen is there was a bug in the algorithm side to where we were looking at the access point load balancing algorithm all the time. Instead of when we went to open the app, we switched to use the app algorithm. That will be in the SR5 track for 12.2. So if you're going to use this and you need to use this the access point load balancer and the unbalanced clustering, be sure you get the SR5 release when it comes out. It should be coming here any day now, but just keep an eye out for that if you need that in that case. Okay, let's jump back to PowerPoint. So that's the only issue I'm aware of other than what we just noticed on the QDS load balancing. And like I said, I'll look into that and I'll try and get some notes up for you guys. So in summary, on the QDS unbalanced, don't forget to activate the main trigger in the QMS config file, that first main setting. Don't forget to configure your web server settings for IS or QVS, and just make sure when you're looking at the help that you're in the right section. If you're using IS, be sure you get the IS section. If you're using our web server, make sure you get the web server section so you get the right settings and files to go look into. And then as we saw, the CPU fitting working set limits go away in the management console, so expect that those are going to disappear on you, and that if you need to make changes, those go directly on each of the nodes in that local settings INI file. Okay, and for the QDS unbalanced, don't forget to rename your template file by taking out the template period so that you've got just the main XLS file at that point. And as we saw, the template will recreate. So if you do edit the main template file, then save it and rename it, then the template will recreate once you do that. The QDS Advanced tab changes. I showed you how that changes as well, so you'll be expecting that. And then I made a note to make use of the dedicated engines where you've got critical apps, but obviously we've got something going on there, so I'll figure out how that works. And what I'll probably do is I'll just submit that to the documentation folks to get the help site updated so that information will be clear for you guys. That's probably the best thing to do. All right, so with that, let me jump to the Q&A. Okay, we have many teams who manage their own tasks in the QMC. Can I allow one team to assign to, and it just flipped me down again. Sorry about that. Come on. Let's see, where'd that one go now?
I've found it if you want me to read it off.
Yeah, go ahead and read it, Troy, because I think
Sure. We
I
have
got...
many teams who manage their own tasks in the QMC. Can I allow one team to assign to a group A and another to group B?
And let's go back to the environment, because I'm trying to think. It'll be easier if we can see things here. Let me go to
I
server
think so,
one.
because you can set, depends on where you
We
have
can
those
do it by
those files
the...
located, right, on
Well, it's going to
folders.
be, because you set your admins on the folder paths. So it's not going to be by node. So I don't think we can get that granular.
But if you do a combination, perhaps you could, only run certain ones from a certain folder on one node.
Yeah, that would be the only way I can think of to do that would be instead of doing the actual QDS cluster in that case. I think what you'd want to do is, so what I've got here is the multiple URLs. So I have my QDSs clustered. I think the way you would want to do your environment is instead of doing the cluster URLs, you'd want to do separate resources out here. So you'd have, instead of having the URLs under the cluster here, I don't know if you can see me highlight these, what you'd want to do is up here, you'd want to add separate resources to point to each box and keep those separate that way instead. That way you can control which folders they're on, and then they can only run tasks on that node. Hopefully that makes sense to you, but a lot of people don't realize that you can cluster. The old verbiage used to be groups. I can't remember what it is, what we called it now either, but it goes back to the early versions of QlikView, like from 8, I think, 8, 9, and 10, where we used to have this way of doing things. But basically, instead of doing the cluster under the single resource, you'd want to do separate resources. And you don't need to change your license. Let me just explain that real quick, too. So the publisher license, you've got the number of excesses here somewhere that I missed. Here it is. So this is what controls how many publisher nodes you're allowed for your publisher, this number of excesses and the value. So, but you're allowed to configure those whichever way you want to. So you can either cluster them here, or you can run individual nodes or resources. You're allowed to do that either way when you have that XS set up. And the reason for that is because the license is maintained by the management service, not the publisher service. Okay, hopefully that helps with that one. All right, let's see if I can grab another one here, unless you found a good one, Troy. Okay, let me see. The next one, if you don't specify a group for some task, where will it run then? Yeah, sorry, I should have covered that. So basically, if we don't do a group, then basically it's going to run on, it's going to use the load balancing algorithm for the publisher services at that point, which I don't know if you guys, let me show you that real quick too, if I can, let's see, that's under, let's see, go back up. So that's, oh, sorry, wrong box. I moved everything over to my, so here's my application data folder for my publishers. This load balance XML is what controls the load balancing for the QDS nodes. So what you should note in here is you'll get these value checks to where it'll basically record what each node is doing when things are running. And this didn't update either, which is odd. This should be updating every time a call goes out. So something's definitely wrong here. But this is what's checked, and this updates every 4 seconds. So in case we haven't told you previously, when you're scheduling your tasks, if you're kicking off a bunch of tasks concurrently, you may need to put a 5 to 10 second gap between those to be sure that we do the load balance check in between the launches. Otherwise, what you may see is they all end up on the same node, and you'd be scratching your head going, okay, wait a minute, why aren't things load balancing? But there's this 4 second update window to this file. So if all those tasks launch within the same 4 second period, then they're probably going to all be attached to the same QDS node. So just keep that in the back of your minds. Okay, we got another one here. if we distribute with Active Directory with a large set of users, then we set the security to the files. We could avoid this by creating groups. Is there any way the validation is done on the web and access to keep us through that? Yeah, you should be able to distribute to groups instead of users. The only time that might be a problem for you is if you're using configurable LDAP and you haven't gotten the configurable LDAP to read the groups. But with Active Directory, let me jump back to server 1 here. I should be able to see my, let's just edit one of these. Oh, actually, let me go to my, yeah, that's fine. We'll just hit distribute. Let me just do it on the folder distribution here. Oh, sorry, hang on. Let me just do this because I've already got this set up. Okay, let's go to distribute here. So I did authenticate. Let me switch this to named, and I click the person icon. Gee, I have no idea what I've got for groups out here. Let me just do an asterisk. Okay, so I've got administrators. I know this is a group. So you should be able to select your groups here and do add. And then what we should do is put the NTFS group. That should be what gets set for the NTFS permissions on that. And provided we can resolve the groups for the users when they come into the web server, that should work fine. Hopefully I'm not missing something in the question. Like I said, I'll go back and reread all these, and if I think of anything else, I'll post those post-presentation. Okay, let me go to the next
Okay,
one.
we've got time for one more question.
Okay, will unbalanced clusters support high availability for automatic failover? So when you're configuring this setup, this is where you have to use the grouping. So let me go back to the file. Let's see, and shoot, did I reopen? Yeah. So yeah, this is my modified one. So what you want to do in those cases, you need to make sure every node covers at least 2 groups in that case. That's how you're going to do your failover. So if you've got multiple nodes, you just need to make sure that every set of groups is at least on 2 of the nodes, so that if one node goes down, that it can also run on that secondary node. That's how you would do the failover in this case. And that's kind of what I did here on node 2, is I said I want to be able to run group A and group B. So if A goes down in this case, those tasks should still run over here on group B. That's basically how you would do that. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. We hope everybody enjoyed this session. Thank you to Brett for presenting. We always appreciate getting experts like Brett to share with us. We've got a legal disclaimer for you and a thank you page. So thank you all once again and have a great rest of your day.